Good morning, friends! Welcome back to Kids Time. I'm so glad that we're up here in the playground together again this morning. I'm Rebekah. I'm the Children, Youth, and Family Director at St. Paul Lutheran Church in Missoula. And again, it's so great to be here this morning. And this week, our story is about Moses. Remember, we talked about him last week and the week before last week. But this week is a special story where we get to learn about one of the most important celebrations in the Jewish tradition. It's called Passover. So let's get to our story. Last week, we heard the story about Moses and the burning bush, where God told Moses that he was supposed to lead the Hebrew people out of Egypt. And Moses was like, "No way, I am not the guy for this job." And God was like, "Yahweh, you're exactly the person that I want for this job. And I'll be with you and help you the whole time." So Moses agreed. When Moses got back to Egypt, he started going to see Pharaoh. Remember, Pharaoh was the guy with all that power who was making life pretty miserable for the Hebrew people. Well, God and Moses, they worked together. And God sent different plagues to try to convince Pharaoh to let the Hebrew people go. God was trying to show Pharaoh that it would be a lot easier for him. It would make his life so much easier if he would just let the people go. There were 10 plagues. One day there were frogs everywhere. And another day there were locusts in everything. And another day, well, there wasn't day at all. It was just shadows everywhere and no light to be seen. And the very last plague was the death of every firstborn son in Egypt. But God promised that none of the Hebrew people would be hurt. And God kept God's promise. The plague of death passed over all of the houses of the Hebrews. And to remember this story of God's incredible promise, the Hebrew people celebrate Passover every year. The people who are the descendants of the Hebrew people in this story are called Jewish people. And Jewish people still do celebrate Passover every single year to remember God's promise. In the service this morning, we heard a story from the Bible that seems like it was a long list of rules. Rules about how to celebrate Passover. Every little piece of how to do this celebration just the right way. Well, why in the world do you think there would be so many rules? Well, just imagine a holiday or a celebration that is super important to your family. Maybe it's birthdays or Christmas or Mother's Day? What do you do to celebrate those days? I would imagine that there's some special way that your family celebrates that makes that holiday so important, and everything has to be done just the right way. Well, it's the same for Passover. Every piece of the tradition, every piece of the celebration of Passover helps to tell this story of how God kept God's promise to the Hebrew people. Every single piece means something. And this promise that God kept was incredible. God promised to the Hebrew people that their lives would be saved, that they were the chosen people, and that they would be free from Egypt. So even though today's story seems like it's full of rules, it helps us understand just how important Passover was to the Hebrew people in our story when God saved them all from the plague of death. And it helps us understand how important Passover is still today to the Jewish people. And even though Christians don't keep all of the rules of Passover and hold it to be quite as special as the Jewish people do, it's still part of our story too. We know that this story helps us remember God's promises, that God always keeps God's promises. And that's the truth. Today, tomorrow, and forever. So thank you for joining me for Kids Time up here in the playground today. It's always so awesome to be with you each week, and I cannot wait to see you right back here next week. Bye, friends.